Well, we have already seen previously how the global AWS infrastructure is composed. Let's break this information down a bit further, starting with the regions and availability zones. So, we already know that the AWS cloud infrastructure is made up of regions and availability zones. An AWS region is a physical location in the world where we have multiple availability zones. Within AWS, the regions are designed in such a way that they are completely isolated from each other. This allows the services offered by AWS to have the highest possible fault tolerance and the highest levels of stability within its infrastructure. The way AWS infrastructure is distributed around the world gives you the flexibility to deploy different components across multiple geographic regions. For example, let's say you have two EC2 instances in two different AWS regions. Any C2 instance is a virtual server in AWS. You will learn what Amazon EC2 is later, but to demonstrate this example well, let's say you have one EC2 instance or virtual server in Ireland, the EU West 1 region, and you have another EC2 instance in London, the EU West 2 region. By default, these EC2 instances will not talk to each other because each region is isolated from other regions. This is by design and allows the system to be fault tolerant. This means that if one region develops a problem or stops working, the other regions will not be affected. Now, each region is represented by a name and a code. For example, the Northern Virginia region is represented as Awsg East 1. London is represented as EU West 2, and so on. Within these regions, AWS uses physical facilities to provide services to its customers. These facilities are known as availability zones. Think of them as data centers. An availability zone can consist of a single data center or multiple data centers. There is no way to know since AWS does not disclose this information, but essentially, an availability zone is a facility within a region from which AWS provides its services. Availability zones within a region are isolated but connected via low latency links. This is different from the concept of a region. By default, regions are isolated, but availability zones within a region are connected. This makes it possible to create a high availability infrastructure. If a failure occurs in one availability zone, you can quickly switch to another availability zone. For example, let's say we have a region with two availability zones, and within these availability zones, you have your web servers. Server 1 is the primary web server and runs in availability zone 1, and server 2 is the secondary and runs in the second availability zone. Server 1 is serving traffic from the internet. If there is a problem with the availability zone, you can quickly switch the traffic to the second availability zone. This is possible because, as I said earlier, availability zones within a region are connected. When you launch EC2 instances, virtual servers, you launch them within an availability zone. So when you are in the EC2 console and you try to launch an instance, you will have the option to select the availability zone you want to launch it in. Also know that each region has at least 3 availability zones, and again, this is for high availability reasons. As I mentioned before, there is going to be a question on the exam asking how many availability zones a region has at a minimum, and the correct answer will be 3. Now, an availability zone is represented by a region code followed by a letter. For example, the availability zones in the Northern Virginia region are represented as US East 1A, US East 1B, US East 1C, and so on because these availability zones belong to the Northern Virginia region, whose region code is US East 1. So, in summary and for the sake of clarity, AWS regions are geographic locations where AWS infrastructures are located. Each AWS region consists of a minimum of 3 availability zones, which are isolated and physically separate locations within a geographic area. Availability zones, on the other hand, are independent data centers with redundant power, cooling, and physical security, and are connected through redundant, ultra-low latency networks. AWS customers who focus on high availability can design their applications to run in multiple availability zones to achieve even greater fault tolerance.